Chapter 1: The Crystal Prison. The chains that bound Damien were not of iron, but of spun gold thread. They were the invisible bonds of a captured king, an Omega who was once the prince of the Eagle clan, a proud, independent people of the sun-scorched mesas, now reduced to a crystal prison in the heart of his enemy's palace. His home was a memory of open skies and the scent of wild sage. This place was a tomb of cold stone and colder ambition, where the air itself tasted of subjugation. Damien moved with a practiced, languid grace, his lithe body a study in outward submission. He poured the Alpha King Leandro's wine, his gaze fixed on the crimson liquid swirling in the crystal goblet. His hands were steady, a testament to a will forged in hardship, despite the tempest raging inside him. He remembered his father teaching him that the greatest warrior was not the one who showed his strength, but the one who mastered it until the moment it was most needed. Every action here was a performance, a carefully choreographed dance of servitude designed to placate the predator who held his life, and the memory of his people, in his hands. Leandro, seated on a throne carved from the petrified heartwood of an ancient forest, watched him with a cruel, detached amusement. His scent, a potent and overpowering mix of cedarwood and cold smoke, permeated every inch of the grand hall. It was an alpha scent, one of dominance and possession, meant to smother and control. To Damien, whose people valued the subtle, shifting sense of the open world, it was a suffocating, ever-present reminder of his subjugation, and it grated on every nerve in his body. To Leandro, Damien was nothing more than a symbol, a living, breathing monument to a conquered people. He saw the proud, defiant spirit that still flickered in Damien's molten gold eyes and delighted in the thought of finally extinguishing it. He had been taught his entire life by his trusted advisor, Lord Valerius, that Omegas were creatures of weakness and chaotic emotion, their magic a corrupting influence that had weakened kingdoms of the past. He remembered Valerius standing with him on a balcony as a boy, watching his own Omega mother in the gardens below. "She is beautiful, my prince," Valerius had said, his voice a silken poison. "But her heart is ruled by the moon, not the sun. It is a man's will, an alpha's will, that forges empires. Remember that." Damien, a prince of a clan led by an Omega, was the ultimate symbol of that perceived decay. For Damien, Leandro was the embodiment of all that was wrong with the world, a tyrant who had swept through his home like a plague, leaving ruin in his wake. He was a king who ruled through fear, whose strength was measured in the number of enemies he crushed, not the number of subjects he uplifted. "Your hands tremble." Leandro's voice was a low rumble, a sound that carried the weight of his absolute power. "Are you unwell, little Omega?" Damien's jaw tightened imperceptibly. He met Leandro's gaze, his own eyes unflinching. "They are steady, my king." The words were a bitter pill on his tongue, the honorific a brand of shame. The Alpha King's lips curved into a predatory smirk. "Perhaps they are. But I can smell the fear on you, Damien. It clings to you like a shroud. Fear is a luxury I cannot afford," Damien retorted, the words slipping out, sharp and untamed, before he could stop them. A flicker of surprise crossed Leandro's face, quickly replaced by a cold satisfaction. This was the game they played. Leandro pushed, and Damien resisted, the unspoken tension between them a live wire threatening to spark at any moment. As the evening wore on, Damien was forced to endure the leering glances of Leandro's inner circle. One guard, a hulking beta with a sneer permanently etched onto his face, followed him as he made his way to the kitchens to refill the wine. "Look at you!" the guard sneered, grabbing Damien's arm. "A king's pet. Your clan's strength was all a lie, wasn't it? All that talk of cunning and spirit, broken by a real alpha." The man's grip was a vice, but Damien's reaction was not what he expected. Instead of flinching, Damien's eyes narrowed. He didn't feel fear, only a cold, calculated rage. With a swift, fluid motion taught to him not for battle but for evading capture in the narrow canyons of his homeland, he twisted his arm free. His elbow connected sharply with the guard's gut, striking a nerve point that made the man's breath seize. The man gasped, doubling over, and Damien was on him in an instant, his knee pressing into the beta's back, his arm twisted behind him. He leaned in, his voice a whisper, devoid of heat but sharp as obsidian. My people survived for 1,000 years in a land that would kill a soft palace dog like you in a day. The next time you touch me, I will show you what a lie our weakness truly is. He said nothing more, but the message was clear. He released the guard and stood, smoothing his silken tunic. The guard's sneer was replaced by a look of shocked, grudging respect. Damien wasn't just a pretty face in a crystal prison, there was a predator lurking beneath the compliant surface. The moment was fleeting, but it was a powerful reminder that while his body may have been captive, his spirit remained untamed. He walked away without a backward glance, leaving the stunned guard in his wake. It was a small victory, but in this suffocating darkness, it was enough to let him breathe. Chapter 2: The Unforeseen Mark. The oppressive heat of the palace was a constant, suffocating presence, a tangible force that seemed to press down on every living thing within its walls. It was a manifestation of Leandro's power, a primal energy that seeped into the very stone and mortar of the building. For Damien, it was more than just a discomfort, it was a poison. The alpha energy, thick and cloying, was a constant assault on his omega biology, a dissonant note in the song of his own body. It was the reason he woke up one night in a cold sweat, his body trembling with a fever he couldn't explain. The fever was a precursor, a warning sign he couldn't heed. The heat came on with a violent force, a sudden inferno that consumed him from the inside out. His senses became a dizzying maelstrom of scents and sounds. The usual oppressive odor of Leandro's authority, that scent of cedarwood and smoke, warped into something else. It was now a sweet, intoxicating siren's call, a promise of the very thing his body instinctively sought for balance and relief. His conscious mind recoiled in horror, but his body betrayed him, pulling him forward. He stumbled through the dimly lit halls, his body on fire, the need to find a cool, dark place overpowering all rational thought. He couldn't hide it, couldn't mask the scent that now clung to him like a second skin, a heady, potent fragrance of a wild desert garden in bloom after a rare rainstorm, a scent of survival and desperate life. The scent was a clarion call that echoed through the palace, a powerful, primal summons that cut through the mundane affairs of the Alpha King. Leandro felt it first as a prickle at the back of his neck, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that drew his attention away from a trade dispute he was mediating. He dismissed his advisors with a brusque wave of his hand, his nostrils flaring as he followed the scent trail like a hound on the hunt. The rational part of his mind, the part that was a king, was horrified by this overwhelming, animalistic need. He had been taught by Valerius that such instincts were a weakness, a flaw inherent in the alpha biology that omegas exploited with their seductive magic. He didn't want this. He didn't want anything to do with the little omega he had captured and tormented. But his body, his instincts, had a will of their own. They led him down a path he had no intention of taking. He found Damien in a small, hidden alcove behind a tapestry depicting one of his ancestors' bloody conquests. Damien's body was curled into a ball, his breathing shallow and ragged. The omega's scent was a whirlwind, a powerful force that assailed Leandro's senses, driving him forward against his will. Damien was a study in vulnerability, his outward defiance stripped away by the sheer force of his biology. He was a wild, untamed thing, and Leandro was a predator drawn to his prey. Leandro went to him, driven by an irresistible instinct he couldn't understand. He didn't intend to mark him. The thought was a repulsive violation of everything he believed in, his control, his dominance, his carefully constructed superiority. But the moment his hand touched Damien's sweat-slicked skin, the bond was no longer a choice. It was a pre-existing condition, a fated connection that had been waiting for the right kind of pressure to snap into place. The world narrowed to just the two of them. Leandro's control, his carefully constructed facade of cold indifference, shattered into a million pieces. His fangs sank into the soft flesh of Damien's neck, not with malice, but with a primal, overwhelming need to claim, to anchor, to possess. The mark was a brand, a permanent inscription of their fated bond, and it was a violation of the highest order. For Damien, The marking was a traumatic, horrifying event. He cried out, a sound of pain and protest, but the sound was swallowed by the desperate cries of his body as it welcomed the bond it had been unknowingly craving for balance in this alpha-saturated prison. When the world righted itself, he was left with a deep, aching bite on his neck, a searing brand of Leandro's claim. He felt violated, used, a broken thing whose autonomy had been stolen in the most profound way possible. Leandro recoiled as if burned, his own body trembling with a mixture of disgust and a possessive satisfaction that was completely alien to him. He looked at the mark, a crimson testament to his loss of control, and a feeling of profound revulsion washed over him. He had not only marked his enemy, but he had also marked himself, and for a king who prided himself on his iron will, it was the ultimate disgrace. The force bond, a physical and spiritual tether between two mortal enemies, was the emotional core of their shared story, a wound that might never fully heal. Chapter 3: The Broken Promise. The dawn that broke over the palace was cold and gray, a stark contrast to the fiery passion of the night before. For Leandro, the light brought with it a sense of profound shame and self-disgust. He woke to the sight of Damien, his body still and quiet beside him in the alcove, the raw bite mark on his neck a testament to Leandro's own weakness. A coldness settled over him, a frigid wall of indifference he erected to protect himself from the reality of his actions. He had marked an Omega, his enemy, no less. He could already hear Valerius's voice in his head, dripping with disappointment and condescension, speaking of how he had succumbed to the very weakness his father had warned him about. He treated the marking as a mistake, a regrettable lapse in judgment he would never repeat. He left Damien in the alcove without a word, the silence more condemning than any accusation. He spent the morning in the war room, his mind racing. He could not, would not, acknowledge the bond. It was an embarrassment, a stain on his reputation, and a threat to his power. He needed a way to invalidate it, to prove to his court, to Valerius, and to himself that it meant nothing. His solution was as cruel as it was calculated. He would solidify a long-proposed political alliance, a public statement of strength and control that would silence any whispers of his supposed weakness. Hours later, Damien, his body still aching from the events of the night, and a new, strange nausea coiling in his stomach, heard trumpets blare from the throne room. He followed the sound, a nagging dread in his gut. When he reached the balcony overlooking the grand hall, he saw Leandro standing on the dais, his face a mask of cold resolve. Beside him stood a beautiful, dark-haired Omega Lyra, a princess from the neighboring kingdom of Havenfall. She looked regal and composed, but Damien could see the subtle tension in her hands, the way she held herself with a practiced stillness that spoke of a life spent as a political piece on a board. Leandro's voice, amplified by magic, cut through the silence of the courtyard. "Today," he announced, "I announce my betrothal to Omega Lyra of Havenfall, an alliance that will bring peace and prosperity to our kingdoms. The union will be a testament to our strength and our shared vision for the future." The words hit Damien like a physical blow. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and the scent of the ornamental flowers in the hall suddenly became cloying, sickening. He swayed on his feet, the world spinning around him. The bond, which had felt like a fragile, terrifying new thing in his heart, suddenly felt like a cruel chain, a joke played by a merciless fate. He watched as Leandro took Lyra's hand, a public display of his rejection. The humiliation was a searing, agonizing fire that consumed him from the inside out. He was not just violated, he was discarded. The marking, which had been a traumatic violation, now felt like a broken promise his own body had been tricked into believing. Leandro hadn't just taken his body, he had stolen his last shred of dignity. As the crowd roared its approval, Damien backed away, a hollow ache in his chest. The nausea returned with a vengeance, and with a dawning horror he knew. He was now pregnant, the first signs already manifesting in his scent and the sudden, violent changes in his body. He was alone, carrying the child of a man who saw him as nothing more than a political tool, a mistake to be erased. He couldn't stay here. The palace was no longer a crystal prison, It was a prison built on lies and broken promises. The humiliation, the pain, the profound sense of worthlessness, it all fueled a fierce, unyielding resolve. He would not be a footnote in Leandro's history. He would not be a forgotten Omega left to wither in the king's shadow. He would flee, not for love, but for survival. His freedom, and the freedom of his unborn child, was a birthright, and he would reclaim it, no matter the cost. Chapter 4: The Escape. The night was a canvas of inky black, perfect for a ghost to slip through. The memory of Leandro's announcement was a bitter taste in Damien's mouth, a constant, low thrum of humiliation and pain. It was this fuel, this righteous anger, that drove him. He was not escaping for some romantic notion of freedom. He was escaping to survive, to ensure the life he now carried within him would not be born into a world of servitude. He would not allow his child to become a symbol of his own degradation. His wit, honed by years of silent observation, was his greatest weapon. He knew the palace better than the guards who patrolled its halls. He had spent months as a servant, memorizing the secret passages, the servants' staircases, and the forgotten crawl spaces. He had charted the movements of the guards, noting their change of shifts, their patterns of patrol, and their moments of inattention. He began by creating a series of decoys. He stole a set of old servants' clothes, ripped a piece of the fabric, and left it snagged on a splintered door frame leading to the western battlements. In the kitchen, he created a more dramatic scene. He poured a full bottle of strong, spiced wine on the floor and, after pricking his finger with a stolen sewing needle, left a bloody handprint on the wall. The sight of blood would create a sense of urgency, a false trail the guards would follow with haste. He moved with a practiced grace, his movements silent and fluid. He was a shadow, a fleeting presence in the palace he had once served. He used a series of ropes and pulleys he had secretly rigged from laundry lines to descend from a high balcony into the labyrinthine gardens below, his body a silent silhouette against the moon. He carried nothing but the clothes on his back in a small, leather pouch. Inside the pouch, tucked away in a hidden compartment, was the only thing he had left of his family, a small, brass compass. Its casing was engraved with the symbol of his people, a soaring eagle with a single, unblinking eye. It was more than a compass. It was a relic, a key to a forgotten magic his people had once wielded. He didn't understand its full power, only that his mother had pressed it into his hand the day Leandro's army arrived, whispering, "It will always guide you home." As he clutched it now, the metal felt strangely warm against his skin, and the engraved eagle seemed to press into his palm, a silent encouragement. The escape was a grueling marathon of cunning and endurance. He scaled the high wall on the far side of the gardens, his muscles screaming in protest, his breath coming in ragged gasps. A guard shout echoed from the other side, but it was too late. He dropped into the darkness beyond the palace grounds, landing with a painful jolt. He was free. The danger was far from over. He was now a fugitive in a hostile world, a pregnant Omega on the run from a king who would surely be fueled by a possessive rage he couldn't understand. But as he looked back at the towering walls of the palace, he felt a surge of exhilaration. He had done it. He had outsmarted the monster who held him captive, and in doing so, he had reclaimed his life. The escape was fraught with danger, a testament to his sheer resourcefulness, and a clear signal to the world that he was not a victim, but a survivor. Chapter 5: The King's Fury. The morning after Damien's escape, Leandro awoke to a silence that was more jarring than any noise. The scent of Damien, which had permeated his chambers for months, was gone. A cold dread, a feeling of violation he couldn't name, settled in the pit of his stomach. He was a king, and no one, least of all a captive Omega, defied him. His initial reaction was pure, unadulterated fury. He threw a goblet across the room, the sound of shattering glass echoing the rage building inside him. "Find him!" he roared, the command a guttural sound that shook the very foundations of the palace. "Scour the kingdom! Bring him back to me, alive!" His fury was a monstrous thing, a tempest of pride and ego. He couldn't fathom how Damien, a seemingly submissive Omega, could have outsmarted his most elite guards. The humiliation was a raw wound. But as the hours stretched into days, his fury began to warp into something else entirely. An irrational, desperate need to find Damien took hold of him. He couldn't sleep. His dreams were haunted by flashes of Damien's face, his eyes filled with defiance. The bond, which he had tried to deny, was now a malevolent parasite. He would be in a meeting with Lord Valerius, discussing troop movements, when a sudden wave of nausea would wash over him, a bone-deep weariness that wasn't his own. He would feel a sharp, stabbing hunger, a gnawing ache in his stomach, and he would know, with a chilling certainty, that Damien was cold and hungry somewhere. One afternoon, while reviewing architectural plans for a new fortress, he was struck by a fleeting, vivid image, the view of a sun-drenched valley, seen from a high ridge. It was accompanied by a feeling of profound, soul-deep relief and safety. The vision vanished as quickly as it came, leaving him breathless and disoriented. It was Damien's emotion, a glimpse through his eyes, and it was maddening. Leandro's top doctors were baffled by his sudden illness. His body ached, his head pounded, and a strange, phantom pain seemed to emanate from the mark on his neck. They spoke of a strange fever, a malady that defied all known treatments. Leandro, in his arrogance, refused to acknowledge the bond as the cause. He was a king, not a creature of instinct. He remembered a lesson from Valerius years ago. They had been watching a hunting falcon return to its master. "See, my prince," Valerius had said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Control is everything. An alpha who lets his instincts rule him is no better than a beast. It is his mind, his will, that makes him a king. Omegas, with their scents and their heats, appeal to the beast. They are a test, and a king must never fail that test." Now, he felt like he was failing spectacularly. These glimpses into Damien's world were like a poisoned wine, each one escalating his desperation. He wasn't just chasing a runaway prisoner, he was chasing a part of himself, a piece of his soul he had been trying to deny. The king who had once been so certain of his power now felt a profound sense of isolation, a desperate need for a connection he had actively rejected. The hunt for Damien was no longer a matter of pride. It was a desperate quest to reclaim the half of his soul that was missing. Chapter 6: The Long Road and the Gathering. The road was long and unforgiving, a ribbon of broken earth that stretched across a kingdom that had once belonged to Damien's people. He traveled through dangerous lands, his body aching with exhaustion and the subtle, persistent demands of his pregnancy. He was a master of disguise, his movements silent, his presence unremarkable. He learned to hunt for small game and forage for edible plants, his wits his only protection against the harsh wilderness. His pregnancy, once a source of humiliation, became a powerful motivator. He was not just surviving for himself, he was surviving for the small life he carried within him. One day, his compass, which had been subtly guiding him toward the forgotten mountain ranges of his ancestors, grew warm in his hand and seemed to tug him off the main road and down a hidden trail. He stumbled upon a small encampment, a collection of makeshift tents huddled in the shadow of a forgotten mountain range. The people were a distrustful and fractured group. They were the displaced, the outcasts, betas and omegas who had lost their homes and families under the Alpha King's rule. They were a motley crew of refugees, each with their own story of loss. They were wary of him at first, a lone omega who carried himself with a quiet dignity that belied his ragged clothes. A cynical, scarred beta named Silas seemed to be their unofficial leader. He blocked Damien's path, a crude axe held loosely in his hand. "We have nothing to spare here," Silas said, his voice flat. "Move on." Damien didn't bristle at the hostility. He looked past Silas at the camp. He saw their vulnerabilities, their poorly constructed shelters, their lack of a cohesive defense, their desperate need for a leader who would empower them, not dominate them. "Your water source is downstream from your waste pits," Damien said calmly. "In a week, half of you will be sick. Your sentries are posted in the open, making them easy targets for bandits. And you're building your fires with green wood, the smoke from which can be seen for miles." Silas stared at him, his suspicion warring with surprise. Damien didn't demand their loyalty, he began to earn it. He showed them how to dig a new latrine, how to use deadfall for smokeless fires, and how to set snares that even a child could manage. He taught them old, forgotten servants' tricks, how to tell the quality of water, how to find hidden trails, and how to use the environment to their advantage. Silas remained his biggest skeptic. "Words are easy," he grumbled one evening. "These are pretty tricks. They won't save us when the king's men come." A week later they did. A small patrol, drawn by the camp's previous carelessness, arrived. But Damien had already prepared. He had them rig a series of rockfalls and pitfalls along the narrow path to the camp. The patrol was routed without a single one of Damien's people having to lift a sword. They captured the soldiers' supplies and weapons. That night Silas approached Damien at the fire. "How did you know?" "I served in Leandro's palace," Damien said quietly. "I learned how his soldiers think. They are arrogant. They expect the weak to be stupid. They never look for traps where they believe there is nothing worth protecting." From that day on, Silas became his most loyal second-in-command. Damien became their de facto leader, a king in his own right, but one who led by empowering others. He didn't use force, he used his strategic mind. He saw the fire of rebellion in their eyes, and he nurtured it, fanning the flames of their discontent into a collective resolve. They called him their King of Shadows, for he led from the back, his power in his mind and his cunning, not in his fists. He had not just found a place to hide, he had found a new purpose, a new family, and a new identity. Chapter 7: The Seeds of Treason. While Damien was building a new life, Leandro's world was slowly unraveling. His trusted advisor, Beta Lord Valerius, was a master of manipulation. He had always disliked Damien, viewing the captive Omega as a symbol of the old ways. Now, with Leandro's strange illness, Valerius saw his opportunity. He subtly undermined Leandro's authority. He suggested that the bond was a weakness, a magical affliction. "My king," Valerius would say, his voice a silken veneer of concern, "this Omega is a poison. He has bewitched you with some ancient, dark magic. His clan was known for it. He is a threat to the kingdom, a stain on your legacy. He must be found and neutralized." Leandro, isolated and desperate, started to listen. The bond was a source of pain and confusion, and the whispers of his advisor made a dark sort of sense. He began to see Damien not as a person, but as a problem to be solved, a sickness to be cured. It was during this time that Omega Lyra began to assert herself. She was not a passive pawn. Her kingdom of Havafall was suffering, and this alliance was its only hope. She needed Leandro to be a strong and stable king. She had heard the rumors of his strange behavior, and the whispers of a runaway Omega. She approached Leandro one day in the royal library. "My king," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "The court whispers. They speak of your sickness. Lord Valerius uses it to sow doubt among your lords. He claims you are unfit, that an Omega's magic has corrupted you." Leandro looked at her, startled by her directness. "Valerius is loyal." "Is he?" Lyra countered softly. "He chose me as your betrothed, did he not? He told my father I was chosen for my pliable nature. He chose me because he believed I would be easy to control. He underestimates us both, your majesty." For the first time, Leandro saw a glimmer of a powerful political mind behind her sad eyes. Later, Lyra began her own quiet investigation. She used her status to access old court records, looking for anything related to Damien's clan or Leandro's father's reign. She found inconsistencies, sealed orders, and reports of Valerius being the sole witness to key events that led to the war with the Eagle clan. She realized she was trapped in a web of lies far more complex than she had imagined, and that her own survival might depend on uncovering the truth. Valerius was not trying to save the king. He was positioning himself to take over a kingdom he believed Leandro was no longer fit to rule. Chapter 8: The Confrontation and the New King. The chase ended in a small, hidden valley, the same one Leandro had seen in his vision. The bond had pulled him here, a relentless beacon. He arrived with a small retinue, his heart a confused tangle of rage and a possessive need that was almost physically painful. He expected to find a broken Omega, a pitiful creature begging for mercy. What he found was a king. The reunion was a hostile standoff. Damien stood in the center of a bustling, fortified camp, his body straight and tall. He was visibly pregnant now, a fact that struck Leandro with the force of a physical blow. But his scent was not the frightened, submissive fragrance of the palace. It was a powerful, earthy presence, a scent of home and hearth and unshakable resolve. He was not a submissive Omega. He was a formidable leader with a tribe of followers who would fight and die for him. They stood behind him, a motley crew of betas and omegas, their eyes filled with a fierce loyalty. Damien! Leandro's voice was a low growl, a mix of shock and rage. You will come back with me. Now. Damien's laugh was a harsh, bitter sound. Come back to what, Leandro? To a life of servitude? To a king who would invalidate a bond in a single day? I am no longer your captive. I am a king in my own right, and this is my kingdom. Before Leandro could respond, Silas and a dozen others stepped forward, weapons raised. You are not welcome here. Silas snarled. Leandro's guards drew their swords, but Damien raised a hand. No. We will not be the aggressors. He looked at Leandro, his golden eyes blazing. Leave. Or my people will force you to. Stunned by this defiance, and seeing the strategic disadvantages of his position, Leandro was forced into a humiliating retreat. He fell back to a nearby hill to watch and wait, utterly bewildered. This was not the broken creature he had left behind. This was a man who had forged a new life out of the ashes of his old one. For the first time, beneath the anger, a grudging respect began to take root. He was forced to see Damien not as a conquered subject, but as a true equal. Chapter 9. The common enemy and the defeat. The fragile peace was shattered days later by the shriek of a war horn. Valerius, having followed Leandro, had brought an army. He saw his chance to eliminate Damien, sever the bond, and frame it as a tragic necessity that would prove Leandro's weakness and cement his own position as the kingdom's true protector. The approaching army marched under the banner of the Alpha King, a final, cruel betrayal. Leandro, standing on the hillock, watched in horror as his own men, under Valerius's command, descended on the valley. The bond was a live wire. He could feel Damien's fear, not for himself, but for his people, and it was a sharp, stabbing ache that twisted his gut. When he saw the first tent go up in flames, a new kind of fury, a righteous rage, seized him. He galloped down the hill, his small retinue of loyal guards following. He arrived in the middle of the carnage, his voice a roar of thunder. Stop! You are under my command! Lay down your arms! The soldiers hesitated. Valerius, mounted on a sleek black steed, watched with a venomous smile. They serve the kingdom, my king, he sneered. They are cleansing a threat you were too weak to handle. At that moment, Damien and Leandro locked eyes across the battlefield. An unspoken understanding passed between them. They were forced to work together, a grudging alliance born of necessity. Leandro fought with a cold, brutal efficiency, cutting down the soldiers who were loyal to Valerius. Damien, no less a warrior, moved through the chaos, his wit his greatest weapon. He directed his people, using the environment to their advantage, leading soldiers into traps, and using his knowledge of old clan fighting techniques to disarm opponents. The tide of the battle began to turn, but not without a terrible cost. A trusted beta and close friend of Damien's, a man named Kalen, was mortally wounded protecting a group of children. Damien was at his side in an instant, cradling him. The bond with Leandro screamed with a shared, profound grief that was not just an echo, but a merging of their pain. Kalen looked up at Damien. Secure a future for our people, he whispered, his last breath a promise. The loss solidified the alliance. The shared pain forged a bond far stronger than any magical marking. The battle ended with Valerius's army in retreat, and Valerius himself captured, gravely wounded. An uneasy truce settled over the valley. Chapter 10: The Shocking Revelation. In the aftermath, Leandro confronted his former advisor. "Why?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. Valerius laughed, a hollow, rattling sound. "For a kingdom free of the taint of Omegas and their cursed magic. I orchestrated the destruction of Damien's clan. It was I who convinced your father that their Omega-led society was a threat. I framed him, made it seem as if he was a tyrant." He spat a mouthful of blood. "I poisoned his mind against your mother, a gentle Omega who did not deserve his contempt. Her death was an accident I arranged." The words hit Leandro like a physical blow. His father's cruelty, his mother's death, it had all been a lie. He had been a puppet, a monster who had tortured an innocent man based on a foundation of lies. Just then, a rider arrived at speed. It was a messenger from Lyra. She had found proof, a hidden ledger detailing Valerius's payments to assassins and false witnesses, and letters written in his own hand outlining his plot to seize the throne. The real twist came in a final, frantic entry. "The relic," Valerius hissed as Leandro read the dispatch, a manic gleam in his eyes. "The Eagle clan's compass. It is a key to a powerful weapon, a forgotten magic that can control the very land itself. Your father sought it. But I knew its true power. I did it all to acquire it for myself, to rule this kingdom with an iron fist made of your Omega's own magic." The full, horrifying truth settled over them. The destruction of Damien's clan, the death of his family, the persecution of his people, it was all a power play for a forgotten magic. Leandro was horrified. Damien felt a strange mix of validation and profound despair. He had always known Leandro was a product of his upbringing, but the sheer audacity of Valerius's lies was a wound that would take a long time to heal. Chapter 11: The Beginning of Trust and the Promise. In the aftermath of the battle, a new kind of silence fell over the valley. Leandro, for the first time in his life, felt the bitter taste of true humility. He found Damien sitting by the fire, his hands raw from tending to the wounded, his eyes vacant with grief for Kaelin. Leandro knelt before him, a king kneeling to a king. "I am so sorry, Damien," he said, the words a raw, unfiltered confession. "I have been living a lie. My cruelty, it was based on a lie. I cannot undo what I have done, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to atone for it. I am sorry." The apology was sincere, a powerful act of contrition that broke through the walls of Damien's resentment. He looked at Leandro, not as a tyrant, but as a man who was also a victim of a terrible lie. He saw the deep, profound regret, and for the first time, he saw a glimmer of hope. Leandro offered to help Damien rebuild. He pledged his own men and resources. "And not only that," he said, his voice firm. "I offer your people land. Autonomy. Protection within my kingdom. This settlement will be a testament to a new beginning. A place where betas and omegas are not only safe, but have a voice in the way this kingdom is run." The moment was the culmination of Leandro's character growth. He had gone from a king who despised Damien's clan to a leader who was now honoring his chosen family. For Damien, it was the ultimate victory. He hadn't just escaped a tyrant, he had changed him. He had found a new home for his people and through his resilience, forced a cruel king to change his ways and his laws. Final chapter: The Rebirth. The story concluded not with a battle, but with the quiet dignity of building. The valley, once a site of carnage, became a bustling hub of activity. The sound of hammers hitting wood, the quiet murmur of people working together, was a powerful symphony. Leandro and Damien worked side by side, their movements synchronized, a testament to their newfound trust. They were no longer enemies, they were partners. The new community became a symbol of the new regime, a place where omegas and betas had a voice. The laws of the land were changed, and a new council was established, made up of representatives from each clan and region, including Damien, representing the newly recognized people of the valley. Their first true test came months later. A dispute over water rights erupted between a traditionalist alpha lord from Leandro's court and Damien's settlement. The lord cited ancient laws of conquest. Damien argued for new laws of shared resources. In the tense council chamber, instead of defaulting to his old authority, Leandro listened. He and Damien mediated together, forging a compromise that respected both tradition and the new principles of equity. It was a small victory, but it proved that partnership was real. Months later, Damien's child was born, a son, with Leandro's dark hair and Damien's golden eyes. He was born into this new world, free of the prejudice that had defined their past. The child was not a symbol of Leandro's shame, but a symbol of their shared hope, the living embodiment of a new order. Their legacy lived on, not in monuments of stone, but in the thriving community they built together. A testament to the power of resilience, the strength of a promise, and the profound, transformative power of a love born from the ashes of hatred.
Hope you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.